The creepy thing about documentaries is that they are usually based on real facts, or in some cases, real events and real people. Today's list is pretty exciting, but prepare for things to get really creepy. Here are 5 of the creepiest documentaries of all time. These documentaries may not dive in too deep into the paranormal side of things, but there is something in telling the tale of real people doing gruesome things that makes it just as horrifying as a good suspenseful film, if not more horrifying. The only difference is these things actually happened or is happening in real life today. We, in Curious on Command, have narrowed down 5 of the most disturbing docu-films and series of all time. And we're only hitting the top of the iceberg as there are thousands of documentaries out there. But first, don't forget to share this video with your murder mystery loving friends and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 5, Wild Wild Country from 2019. This docu-series can be streamed on Netflix and is about a guru of Indian descendants who formed a hippie community in the Oregon desert, wishing to turn into his own utopia. A utopia is a community with desirable qualities that majority of the people want to be a part of. But the question is anything ever what it seems? We think you know the answer to that. Little did we know that Bhagwan Shri Rajneesh, the guru who would later be known as Osho, would be the biggest fraud of all. But is he really? Turns out the utopia was actually a new age sex cult, preaching the concepts of free love and open sexuality, something Osho stood for throughout his life. There are so many surprising twists and turns to this docuseries that can make you feel deceived. And once the twists are revealed, every single episode will get you to the edge of your seat every single time. Broken promises, a rigged election, and literal mass poisoning? Yes, you heard me right. You'll probably want to stay up and binge watch everything in one night. I know I did. Number 4, Mommy Dead and Dearest from 2017, also called the Gypsy Rose Blanchard story. This is an HBO documentary film about a mother-daughter relationship gone wrong in the most tragic way possible. As the movie progresses, some pretty hard pills to swallow, plus a shocking revelation that will have you puzzled and even emotional. The film is circled around the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard, who is Gypsy's mother and primary caregiver. Gypsy grew up a very sick girl. She suffered from leukemia, and her mother seems to be doing everything in her power to care for Gypsy and protect her at all cost. But is she? And in 2016, Gypsy was sentenced to 10 years in prison along with her then boyfriend for the charges of first and second degree murder of her own mother. The details are incredibly eerie and tragic, to say the least. Apparently, Gypsy was actually held hostage by her own mother. And if that isn't disturbing enough, turns out Gypsy doesn't even have cancer, and her mother Dee Dee is suffering from a rare mental disorder called syndrome by proxy, a rare but sinister form of child abuse. These include acts of physical harm and manipulation throughout her daughter's entire life. A film called Love You to Death is inspired by these tragic events. Number 3. This is the Zodiac Speaker from 2007. This follows a well-known case of the Zodiac Killer, a man known to send cryptic codes to those after him and has been linked to multiple murders in the 60s and 70s in California and possibly Nevada. Until this day, the cases remain unsolved, and the killer, whose face is identified with only a mere sketch, is still unidentified. If you have an obsession with serial killer flicks, this one's for you. I know the previous entries already have you tied up in knots with questions and emotions. Buckle up, it's about to get even more twisted. But don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Number 2, The Woman Who Wasn't There from 2012. This may sound like a ghost story at first, only it isn't. This tastefully made documentary by Angelo Guglielmo Jr. is about a woman who survived the 9/11 attacks. Alicia Head was in the building when the attacks took place. She vividly recalled having to walk down 78 floors even after her skin caught fire. And even worse, her fiancé did not survive the attack. After her traumatic and heartbreaking experience, she became the president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network, and even led a support group of other survivors of the ordeal. And as you may have guessed based on the title, she wasn't really there. In fact, she wasn't even in the country on September 11, 2001. Her real name is Tania, and she is not who she appears to be. This psychological thriller digs deep into Tania's head, told from a unique inside perspective that is both light and twisted, thanks to the direction and cinematography. I guess the question in everyone's head now is, why? Why did she do it? And what were her motives for doing something so bizarre? I guess it is for you to find out. Clue: it's actually all psychological. The Woman Who Wasn't There is now streaming at Amazon Prime. Ready for number 1? Let's get to it. But first, hit that subscribe button. We post quality content daily. Number 1, Crazy Love from 2007. Probably the most messed up love story of the 20th century. Next to Sid and Nancy, of course. The film was set in the 1950s, following real events and real people. In fact, actual footage of real interviews and commentaries made up most of this documentary. Here's a summary of their crazy love story. A love that is bordering an obsession. Lawyer Bert Pugot met a classy, glamorous young woman named Linda Riss, and they dated for quite some time, but eventually broke up due to some issues about Bert's former marriage. Bert ended up heartbroken, and that led him to do some pretty crazy things. Bert soon discovered that Linda was engaged to another man sometime after their breakup. Here's where it gets really messed up. Bert hired someone to throw sodium hydroxide, also known as lye, on his ex-girlfriend's face, causing her to go blind. Although the documentary is portrayed in a light and comic manner, there is no denying how messed up all this really is. He spent 14 years serving time in federal prison for what he did to her. Despite that, his love for her still remained. He sent dozens of letters, and eventually he convinced her to see him after his release. The biggest plot twist of all, they ended up getting back together and were happily married until Linda passed away in 2013. For Bert, persistence is indeed the key. We know there are thousands of documentaries out there. Which ones would you want to hear about on our next list? Let us know in the comments section, and we'll work really hard to fulfill that list.